At Pomaria, where the Oued Metchkana descends from the mountains of Tlemcen, rushes down the slopes and crosses the valleys. There was water, long before the Roman military camp, long before the city itself, more than half a century after the colonization project of the province of Oran, initiated by Lieutenant General de la Moricière, and presented to the Governor-General, Maréchal Bugeaud, who drew inspiration from Azema's memoirs on Roman domination. The three French scholars mentioned in the previous episode on Oued Metchkana reached the same conclusion. North Africa's climate has changed little since antiquity. This continuity, Azema notes, prompted Roman authorities to correct nature, despite the inherent fertility of the irrigated land. This permanence explains why Roman strategies could later be reused, or even reactivated, by French colonization. The logic was identical, to turn the region into a granary for France, just as it had once been for Rome. Speaking of the Romans, soldiers chose their settlement sites with great care. Three criteria guided their decisions: the abundance of water, a natural slope allowing water drainage, and a position that was easy to defend. The Castellum of Pomaria met all three requirements, and more. One telling detail reveals much about Roman organization. Public baths were built at the very heart of the camp, for the soldiers themselves. An ancient inscription, embedded today in the minaret of Agadir's mosque, mentions Caecilius Jovinus, who is said to have restored them. We find the names of Muslim geographers who described the city's daily life through vivid first-hand accounts, without any strategic intent to control the land. At the end of the 10th century, Ibn Hawqal describes an ancient, well-irrigated city, equipped with mills and extensive cultivated lands. Al-Zuri mentions a fact, still evoked with pride in Tlemcen's popular culture: the excellence of its water and its air. Among these accounts, only al-Bakri, at the beginning of the 11th century, specifies that the ancients had brought water from several springs called Lurit, located 6 miles away. He speaks of streams powering mills and forming the Safsif River. But we don't really know who those ancient people were. Romans? Macisiles? It seems that even he himself wasn't sure. Local memory, however, gave it a name: Sakiyat Urumi, the Roman Sakiya, or Sakiyat en Nasrani, the Christian Sakiya. A cultural imprint, an echo of the past, suggesting an ancient origin, though no archaeological source allows us to confirm this definitively. Al-Hajj Muhammad ibn Ramdan Shawsh notes in his book that the name of the Sakiya points to its builders, the Romans. Some attribute its construction to the famous bishop, Longinus Pomariensis, whose name appears in the Notitia Provinciarum and Civitatem Africae as the 43rd bishop of Mauritania Caesariensis, known for his resistance to Vandal Arianism in the 5th century. Yet, this ancient structure remains anonymous, as no text assigns to Longinus the role of Aquiligius, a hydraulic engineer. In terms of engineering, Colignac, in his thesis on the Tlemcen Mountains, emphasizes that these mountains, covering some 3,000 square kilometers and heavily fissured, allow large amounts of rainwater and snowmelt, between 200 and 400 billion liters per year, to infiltrate. This water then flows underground and resurfaces at the foot of the mountains in Tlemcen. An old map from 1895 shows the rivers in the Tlemcen Mountains, Oued Metchkana, Oued Sidi Afif, and their tributaries. These waters fed the ancient networks to prevent the city's springs from drying up. Among them were the Ubad Springs, particularly the famous Sidi Boumediene Spring, These springs were connected to Oued Metchkana, forming a network that irrigated the plains of Maunia and Safa. Today, thanks to digital tools and artificial intelligence, we have been able to virtually revive this long-neglected path. Layers of soil and vegetation, covering large sections of the Sakia, were digitally cleared. It is no longer exactly as it once was, yet it still allows us to glimpse what the landscape used to be, an ancient hydraulic knowledge now nearly erased by time. And yet the mountains are beginning to speak again. The slopes, the curves, and the faint remains reveal the brilliance of the engineers who designed and shaped this water network. It was a line drawn through nature, a pathway alive with movement, a thread of water linking one structure to the next. A silent testament to the mastery of the civilizations that brought water to Pomaria, without which the city could never have existed. It should have remained a living reality. God willing, may the water one day flow through it again, so that the Sakiat Urumi does not become merely a name. In Tlemcen's memory. After exploring the virtual flow of water in the Sakia, this time our guide is not the stork, but the golden eagle, which once nested on Jebel Tala. From this mountain, we observe the El Weret waterfall, before following the eagle as it soars above, showing us the course of the Sakia from its source all the way to its end. Water bursts forth from the heart of the Jebel, fills the El Gelta, whose overflow escapes through the western extremity to quickly reach Fej Eri. It then rushes down the slope, sometimes steep, following the mountain's natural curves. Along its course, it brushes past the remains of mills now in ruins. First that of Mesafai Haj al-Gudi, then the mill of Rokia, that of a second Mesafai, and finally, at Sidi Taher, the mill of Buyakub. The thread of water continues below the sanctuary of Sidi Abdallah Diel Bal, runs along the right side of the road, reaches the heights overlooking the village of El Ubad, passes successively through Sidi Tahar and Bayrawana, before arriving near Villa Rivod, in Upper El Kila. There, it joins the Mesafai mill, just before meeting the Oued Metchkana. I hear people say that the route through the mountains is still clearly visible and that remains of the Sakia can still be found. But in Bayrawana and Al-Kila, everything has disappeared. Fortunately, an old map preserves its course in the areas where the traces have vanished, especially around Bayrawana and Upper Al-Kila. I cannot conclude this episode without mentioning Ibn Khamis, poet of the Zionid court and private secretary to Sultan Abi Sa'id Uthman, son of Nuyuv Marasan. But Ibn Khamis was not merely a poet. He was also a scholar, philosopher, sage, astrologer, alchemist, and man of letters. He maintained a special bond with Sakiat Urumi, which he names and celebrates in his verses. It is in this spirit that I invite you to discover this final passage, which brings this episode to a close. Ibn Khamis at-Tlemceni often escaped to the mountains, near the Sakiat Urumi, where he found the calm he needed to listen to his thoughts and reflect on the vicissitudes of the palace. Sitting on a rock, he would contemplate the majesty of the high mountains and the distant horizon. It was there that his mind would travel back in time. He imagined a group of workers, in the 3rd century, a team like so many others entrusted with building the Sakia that brought water, from Eluri to Pomaria. Every day, they climbed the mountain, arriving out of breath. Around them, stones and scrub covered the terrain. To trace the route, they began by clearing rocks, soil, and all the vegetation. They worked from morning until after sunset, then returned at dawn to resume their labor. Once the path was cleared, they began digging the canal and deepening it. Some built, others cut stone, while children carried water to the workers. When the blocks were ready, They paved the bottom of the Sakia, built its walls, and reinforced them. When the work was finished, great joy filled the group. They gathered around the structure they had just completed, waiting for the water from Eluri to find its way there for the first time. When the water began to flow and filled the Sakia, their happiness was immense. Ibn Khamis sighed and emerged from his reverie. At that moment, the idea came to him to compose a poem about the Sakia at Urumi, in which he said,
لساقية الروم عندي مزيات وإن رغمت تلك الروابي الرواشح فكم لي عليها من غدو وروحة تساعدني فيها المنى والمنائح فطرفي على تلك البساتين سارح وطرفي على تلك الميادين جامح تحاربها الأدهان وهي ثواقب وتهف بها الأحلام وهي رواجح ظباء مغانيها عواط عواطف وطير مجانيها شواد صواضح تقتلهم فيها عيون نواظر وتبكيهم منها عيون نواضح.
In the next episode, we follow the quiet power of water, tracing the path of hydraulic energy through the watermills that once accompanied the Oued Metchkana and the Sakia Urumi. We will rediscover how these mills lived by the rhythm of the current, shaped by diverse techniques born from the land itself. Finally, I wish to offer my deepest thanks to my guide in the Oued Mountains, Abdul Hamid ibn Zazua, a son of this land, who has known these places since childhood, stone by stone, memory by memory.